Remove this eyesore immediately or face legal action. That was the first line of the letter I found duct-taped to the door of my grandfather's hunting cabin, written in bold red ink, signed by someone named Cliff Reynolds, president of the Pine Ridge Estates HOA. I stood there in disbelief, boots still wet with morning dew, staring at the weathered planks of that old door like it had betrayed me. That cabin wasn't just a shack in the woods, it was Granger land, passed down through 3 generations of mountain men. My grandfather built it with his own hands in 1950, and I'd been coming here since I could walk. It was my place of peace, a monument to the life my family carved out in these hills of Colorado. But apparently, to the newly formed Pine Ridge Estates down the mountain, it was an aesthetic nuisance. My name's Sam Granger. I'm 68 years old, a retired game warden, and I own 120 acres of forested land nestled up against the western slope of Mount Avery. The cabin sits on the edge of my property, right where the tree line breaks and the river bends. Until 6 months ago, the nearest neighbor was a 2-hour hike away. Then the developers came. Then the McMansions. And now this. The letter wasn't just rude, it was a declaration of war. They wanted me to tear down the only real legacy my family left me, claiming it violated the community's visual harmony. Let me be clear, I don't live in their community. I don't pay their dues. I don't even share a road with them. But these HOA folks? They thought they could extend their rules to cover my land because, as one of their board members smugly told me later, your cabin can be seen from our hiking trail. I've dealt with bears, poachers, and blizzards that could swallow a man whole, but I've never encountered anything as arrogant, entitled, and unrelenting as a homeowners association with a clipboard and a false sense of power. And trust me, they picked the wrong mountain to mess with. The very next week, I received a thick envelope in the mail, delivered by certified courier and stamped with some official-looking Pine Ridge Estates HOA seal. Inside was a 3-page notice of noncompliance, citing my cabin for violations against their community's visual integrity, unauthorized land use, and, get this, environmental disruption through improper structure placement. According to them, my cabin was an eyesore visible from multiple vantage points within Pine Ridge recreational trails, and its unregulated presence threatens the ecological balance and property values of Pine Ridge Estates. I read it 3 times just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. I wasn't. These people were dead serious. They gave me 30 days to either begin the deconstruction process or face escalating fines, starting at $2,500 per week. They even included a form for me to sign, an agreement that I would voluntarily remove the non-conforming structure. I laughed out loud and crumpled it into a ball. That night, over a cup of black coffee and a fire crackling in the stone hearth, I called my niece, Lily Granger, an environmental lawyer in Denver with a sharp mind and a sharper tongue. "Hey, Lil," I said, holding back my irritation. "Got a minute to look at something ridiculous?" "Always," she said. "HOA trouble?" I scanned the letter and sent her photos. 5 minutes later, she called me back, laughing. "They're completely out of their minds," she said. "Sam, Pine Ridge Estates has 0 legal standing on your land. You're outside the HOA boundaries. This is a scare tactic." "Figured as much," I said. "So I can ignore it?" "You could. But document everything," she warned. "If they escalate, we hit back hard." I took her advice. I started keeping every letter, envelope, even postmarked receipts. I took photos of the cabin from every angle, especially the ones that faced Pine Ridge's direction. You could barely see the chimney poking out through the tree canopy from their furthest trail overlook, but that was enough for them to make it a crusade. Weeks passed. No more letters came, and I figured maybe they'd finally backed off once they realized I wasn't some old pushover. But then came the knock. It was a Sunday morning in late spring. I was splitting logs behind the cabin when I heard someone clearing their throat near the edge of the tree line. I turned to see a man in a golf shirt and khakis, holding a clipboard like it was a badge. "Mr. Granger?" he called out. "Depends who's asking," I replied, setting down my axe. He approached slowly, glancing around the property like he was inspecting it. Cliff Reynolds, president of the Pine Ridge HOA. Just wanted to have a chat. You already did, I said flatly. You sent a letter. I threw it in the fireplace. He stiffened. That wasn't wise. You're in clear violation of several regulations. Structures like this, especially ones as aged and unsightly as yours, pose a real problem to our community. Your community ends where my fence line begins, I snapped. This cabin was here before your roads, your houses, and your damn hiking trails. Cliff gave a tight smile. We'll see what the county says. He turned and walked away without another word. I stood there, jaw clenched, blood boiling. They weren't backing off. They were just getting started. 2 weeks after Cliff Reynolds started off my land, I headed back up to the cabin for a weekend of solitude. Just me, the trees, and a cooler full of venison jerky. The last thing I expected was a piece of bright orange paper stapled across my front door, fluttering in the breeze like a threat. Condemned for removal, notice of hazardous structure. Below it, in fine print, it cited Joint Enforcement Action, Pine Ridge Estates HOA and Environmental Standards Committee. My hands clenched into fists. I hadn't authorized any inspection. There had been no county notice, no hearing, nothing. And I sure as hell didn't give anyone permission to step foot inside that cabin. I slowly pushed open the door and froze. The air inside had been disturbed. My gear, normally neatly stored on the rack, had been shifted. My firewood bin was out of place, and the protective tarp covering the old hunting rifles was pulled halfway back. Someone had been inside. I backed out, heart pounding, not in fear, but in fury. I locked the door, turned on my heel, and drove straight into town. The next day, I installed 2 motion-activated trail cams, one facing the driveway, another tucked into the trees near the porch. If they came back, I'd catch them in the act. Didn't take long. Just 4 days later, my phone buzzed with a motion alert. I opened the trail cam feed and there they were, 3 figures, 2 men and a woman, dressed in matching Pine Ridge HOA jackets. One of them held a clipboard, another carried a handheld device scanning the ground, and the last one took pictures of the cabin exterior. I watched in disbelief as they walked around my property, pointing, photographing, acting like they owned the place. One of them pulled a small toolkit from their backpack and began unscrewing the housing to my solar generator. I nearly broke the phone in my hand. I called the local sheriff's department immediately. This is Sam Granger. I need to report trespassers on my property, again. The deputy on duty sounded hesitant. Is this about the Pine Ridge situation? Damn right it is, I growled. They've entered my land without permission, again, and are tampering with my property. I have video proof. There was a pause. Mr. Granger, we're currently reviewing jurisdiction on this. The HOA claims you're within their environmental oversight zone. What the hell is an environmental oversight zone? I barked. I'm just relaying what's on the report, sir, the deputy replied. Until we get clarification from the county attorney, we've been instructed not to intervene. I sat there stunned. These people didn't just think they could write letters and bark from the other side of the trail. They were now physically violating my land and using bureaucratic gray areas to cover their tracks. I forwarded the video clips to Lily with a simple message. We're past letters. It's war. She called 5 minutes later, furious. This is criminal trespass, Sam. We're going to document everything, and I'll start drafting cease and desist letters tonight. The next morning, I drove down to the county courthouse and requested a full property survey from the archives. Every inch of my 120 acres, boundaries and all. I also printed stills from the camera footage and began logging every single interaction with Pine Ridge. They thought I was just some crusty old man with a rusty truck and a cabin in the woods. They had no idea I'd spent 35 years enforcing land and wildlife laws. And now, I was going to make it my personal mission to teach them what real boundaries looked like. Would you have fought back like Sam did? Comment yes if you would, or NO if you'd have walked away. Lily didn't waste time. Within 48 hours, she had unearthed something I hadn't even known myself. In 1982, the state of Colorado had designated a swath of land stretching across Mount Avery's western ridge, including my family's parcel, as part of a protected historical hunting corridor. Specifically, the Granger cabin was listed as a cultural fixture of early 20th century alpine subsistence hunting, recognized for its preservation of traditional wilderness use and its role in state-approved wildlife studies dating back to my grandfather's time. She emailed me the scanned documents from the Colorado Division of Parks and Heritage, with a subject line that read, "This cabin is untouchable. By law." Turns out, the cabin couldn't be moved, destroyed, or even altered without explicit approval from the state. And more importantly, HOAs had zero jurisdiction over land within a designated heritage corridor. It was the golden ticket. We wasted no time. Lily drafted a formal cease and desist letter, citing the Colorado Cultural Sites Act, the Protected Structures Provision, and a specific section under state law granting immunity from private encroachment. We sent it via certified mail to the Pine Ridge Estates HOA with return receipt requested. For good measure, I also hand-delivered a copy myself. Cliff Reynolds wasn't happy to see me. He opened the door to the HOA office with that same smug expression he wore like cologne. I handed him the letter without a word. He scanned the first page, and for the first time since this circus started, I saw something flicker in his eyes: hesitation. "This doesn't change much," he muttered, folding the letter without finishing it. "We still have a duty to maintain the value and character of Pine Ridge." I smirked. "You have a duty to stay off my land, Cliff. That's the only character you need to worry about." But they weren't finished. 2 days later, I got another envelope in the mail, this one marked "Final Notice." It was more of the same. Demands to initiate removal of unpermitted structures, threats of civil liability for property devaluation, and language that danced around legality like a drunk moose in a snowstorm. I called Lily. "They're doubling down." "Of course they are," she said. "People like that don't back down until someone in a robe tells them they're wrong." She updated the file, logged the continued harassment, and prepared a complaint to be submitted to the state attorney general's office. We weren't just going to shut them up, we were going to expose the whole HOA for knowingly violating state law. Meanwhile, I wasn't just sitting back. I printed laminated copies of the Colorado Heritage designation and posted them on the front door, the trees at the property boundary, and right next to my mailbox down the hill. I even mounted one on a wooden sign that read, "State Protected Structure, Trespassing is a felony." The next time Cliff or his clipboard brigade thought about hiking up here uninvited, they'd see it in bold capital letters. They thought this place was just an old shack in the woods. What they didn't realize was that shack had teeth, claws, and legal standing sharpened over 3 generations. And I was done playing nice. Just when I thought they'd finally gotten the message, they came back louder, and this time, they brought machines. It was early July, the sun barely peeking through the pines when I got another motion alert from my trail cams. I opened the feed expecting to see a curious deer or maybe a nosy hiker. Instead, what I saw made my stomach drop. A pickup truck and a UTV, clearly marked with the logo of Mountain Structure and Safety Services, chugged up the gravel path toward my cabin. 2 men in hard hats got out, followed closely by Susan Kessler, HOA board member and Pine Ridge's self-appointed environmental inspector. They didn't knock. They didn't ask. They stormed in like they owned the place. One of the workers began walking the perimeter of the cabin, taking soil samples and notes. The other was inspecting the support beams underneath the porch. Susan stood back, barking instructions like she was leading a military op. Then the UTV took a wide turn, rolled over my south fence line, and crushed 3 sections of wire fencing flat, the same fencing that kept the local elk herd from trampling my vegetable beds. Even worse, their tires tore through the hillside next to my natural spring runoff, which fed a narrow creek I'd been preserving for over 20 years. Muddy tire tracks carved deep ruts into the bank, disrupting the water flow and kicking up silt into the channel. By the time I got up there, they were gone, but the damage was done. The camera footage caught it all, time-stamped, crystal clear, and damning. I took photos of the destroyed fence, the gouged hillside, and the debris-strewn water. I brought in a certified land surveyor and a hydrologist from the county extension office to assess the environmental impact. Both confirmed the spring's runoff had been significantly disturbed, and restoring it would take weeks of labor and specialized equipment. Lily nearly exploded when she saw the footage. "They brought in a third-party contractor to commit a felony trespass," she said, pacing in her office on the video call. "That's not just civil, that's criminal." That week, we filed a formal lawsuit against the Pine Ridge Estates HOA in Jefferson County District Court. The charges were comprehensive: trespassing on protected private property, destruction of property and fencing, environmental interference, and damage to a registered natural feature, violation of the Colorado Cultural Heritage Protection Act, knowingly operating outside legal jurisdiction. Lily wasn't pulling any punches. And neither was I. We sent copies of the lawsuit to local media outlets, the Colorado State Historical Office, and the county commissioner. We knew once the public got wind of it, this wouldn't just be a private dispute. It would be a PR nightmare for Pine Ridge. The HOA's response? Smear campaign. A week after we filed, a printed newsletter was hand-delivered to every home in Pine Ridge Estates. A neighbor I knew from the feed store slipped me a copy with an embarrassed shrug. On the front page, in bold font above a blurry picture of my cabin, were the words, "Local structure threatens mountain aesthetics. Longtime resident refuses modern compliance." Below it, they described my cabin as a rotting, wildlife-disrupting hazard, and claimed I was openly defying conservation efforts for personal nostalgia. They even accused me of channeling runoff water illegally, as if I'd built some dam to divert a river. I was furious, but I wasn't surprised. When people like this can't win with facts, they twist the narrative. They wanted to make me look like the bad guy, the stubborn relic standing in the way of progress. What they didn't realize was, this relic had paperwork, legal standing, and a damn good lawyer. We doubled down. Lily filed a motion for a preliminary injunction, requesting the court bar the HOA and its members from setting foot on my land during litigation. We attached every photo, every motion cam video, every professional report. To build even more pressure, I sat down for an interview with the local news station. I stood in front of the cabin, framed by towering pines, and told them the truth. This isn't about a cabin. It's about the arrogance of a group who think their neighborhood rules outweigh 100 years of Colorado history. The clip went viral. Support poured in, from ranchers, veterans, hikers, and even environmental groups. People were furious that a registered historical cabin could be treated like trash just because it wasn't shiny enough for some gated community. And now the HOA wasn't just facing a lawsuit. They were facing public outrage. The fallout didn't stop with angry online comments. Several Pine Ridge residents reached out to me directly, shocked that their HOA had taken it this far. One woman, Marla Simmons, a biology teacher and single mom, wrote me a letter apologizing for the board's behavior. "I moved here for nature, not to destroy it. I had no idea what they were doing. Please don't judge all of us by their actions." Another resident, an elderly man named Dennis who walked past my fence every morning, brought me a cherry pie and a handwritten note. All it said was, "They're making fools of all of us. Thank you for standing your ground." Even a few HOA members began distancing themselves from the smear tactics. According to a leaked email Lily got hold of, one board member wrote, "If this goes to trial, we're screwed. We ignored a state designation, trespassed, and damaged a protected water source. This is going to bury us." And that's when I knew we weren't just winning legally. We were winning hearts and minds. The Jefferson County Courthouse was packed the morning of the hearing. Word had spread fast. Local media lined the sidewalk outside, and I spotted a few familiar faces from town seated in the gallery, whispering and pointing as we walked in. I wore my best boots, pressed denim, and a clean button-down shirt. Beside me, Lily looked like a storm in heels, crisp navy suit, hair pulled back, and a stack of neatly labeled evidence folders in her arms. Across the aisle, Cliff Reynolds sat at the defense table with 2 attorneys in expensive suits and a third board member I didn't recognize. Susan Kessler wasn't there. Rumor was, she'd quietly resigned the week before. The presiding judge, Honorable Marjorie Whitlock, didn't waste time with pleasantries. She read through the case summary, eyes narrowing as she reached the part about the heritage designation. Lily stood first, calm and razor-sharp. Your Honor, what we have here is not just a case of trespass. It is a calculated campaign of harassment, carried out under the false premise of authority, by an HOA that knowingly extended its power beyond its legal bounds. She presented full property records dating back to 1950, including the state designation from 1982, complete with signatures from the Department of Parks and Heritage. She showed high-resolution satellite imagery proving that Pine Ridge Estates had built within inches of my property line, but not beyond it. And then came the video evidence. We watched in silence as the courtroom monitors played footage from my trail cams. Cliff and his crew inspecting my cabin without permission. The contractor's UTV rolling over my fence. The torn hillside, the diverted stream. The stapled condemnation notice on my front door. The smug expression on Cliff's face when I handed him the cease and desist. When it ended, you could hear a pin drop. Then came the real hammer. Lily handed the judge a copy of a draft zoning map, obtained through a public records request, in which the Pine Ridge HOA had attempted to redraw their development boundary to include the ridge where my cabin sat. The judge raised an eyebrow. Ms. Granger, are you alleging this was an intentional falsification of boundary lines? Yes, Your Honor, Lily said without hesitation. And we can demonstrate that the HOA submitted this draft as part of an application to the County Planning Board, without notifying affected landowners. Namely, Mr. Granger. Cliff's attorney jumped up, stammering. Objection, there's no proof of submission. Judge Whitlock held up a hand. Sit down, counselor. I'll make that determination. She reviewed the documents slowly. Then she looked over her glasses, gaze fixed on Cliff. Mr. Reynolds, were you aware this cabin had a state historical designation? Cliff's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Did your board authorize unpermitted inspections of Mr. Granger's property? We believed we had jurisdiction under our environmental covenant. You believed wrong, she snapped. The ruling came an hour later, and it wasn't subtle. This court finds that the Pine Ridge Estates HOA knowingly and repeatedly trespassed on private property, caused damage to protected land and water features, and engaged in harassment while falsely asserting legal authority. She granted a permanent injunction. No member of the Pine Ridge HOA board, current or future, may set foot on Mr. Granger's property without written consent. Violations will result in contempt of court charges. Then came the damages. $18,000 in property restoration costs. $52,000 in punitive damages for harassment, emotional distress, and violation of protected status. And most notably, the board members named in the complaint, Cliff Reynolds, Susan Kessler, and Barry Nolan, are hereby ordered to resign their positions immediately and are referred to the district attorney for review of potential criminal charges related to misrepresentation and unlawful entry. Lily sat back, calm as ever. I just stared ahead, jaw tight. I wasn't angry anymore. I was relieved. Seen. Heard. The judge looked straight at me before closing the case. Mr. Granger, Colorado has a long history of pioneers, ranchers, and stewards of the land. It's clear to this court that you've upheld that legacy. I hope others learn from your persistence. As we walked out of the courthouse, the cameras flashed and microphones swarmed. But I ignored them. What mattered most was the peace I'd fought to reclaim, and the fact that now, it was protected by more than just pine trees and memories. Back at the cabin that evening, I sat on the porch with Lily, sipping strong coffee as the sun dipped behind the ridge. You did good, Uncle Sam, she said. I chuckled. We did good. And for the first time in months, the woods were silent again. What was the most satisfying moment in this story? Comment the number. 1. When Sam caught them on camera. 2. When the judge ruled in his favor. 3. When the HOA had to resign. As the ruling spread, the ripple effects were immediate. Several residents of Pine Ridge sent handwritten apologies. One woman even brought up a basket of homemade preserves with a note tucked inside. "We had no idea what Cliff was doing. You have every right to be here. Thank you for standing firm." The HOA's website went offline within 24 hours. Local headlines labeled it "The HOA that went too far," and one radio station hosted an hour-long segment titled, "When Neighborhood Power Crosses the Line." Later that evening, Lily and I sat on the porch in the same creaky chairs where I used to watch deer with my grandfather. A cool wind stirred the trees, and the scent of pine drifted through the air like memory itself. "You ever think they'd back down?" Lily asked, watching the sunset bleed across the ridgeline. I shook my head. "Nope. But I knew they'd run out of road once they hit the truth." She smiled. "This place means something, Uncle Sam. Not just to you, to a lot of people now." And for the first time in what felt like forever, I exhaled fully. The mountain had gone quiet again. Peace had returned, not just in the legal sense, but in the soul-deep, pine-scented way only those who fought for their land can ever really understand. 3 weeks after the ruling, a new Pine Ridge HOA board was elected. Their first act? A formal, handwritten letter of apology, delivered to me in person by their new president, Ellen Marks, a soft-spoken retired librarian who'd only moved into the community last year. She stood nervously on my porch, clutching the letter with both hands. "Mr. Granger," she said, "we're sorry. Deeply. The previous board, they acted without integrity, and without the consent of most of us. We'd like to do better." To my surprise, she didn't ask for forgiveness. She asked for a conversation. Later that month, a group of Pine Ridge residents asked if they could bring their kids up to see the cabin. "They've never seen a real wood stove," one father said, "or a working spring. This is like a museum to them." And so, for the first time in decades, I opened the doors of the old Granger cabin to strangers, not as intruders, but as guests. I hosted 2 small tours that fall. I showed the kids how to stack kindling properly, how to listen for the rustle of mule deer in the brush, and how to read the moss to find north. They asked questions. They touched the old tools with reverence. And somewhere between stories and mores, a kind of healing began. Lily, ever the visionary, filed a petition with the County Historical Board to designate the cabin as a local heritage site. With the court ruling in hand, the paperwork flew through approval. The cabin that once sparked legal war was now an official part of Colorado's cultural record. One cold November night, Lily and I sat inside by the hearth, the fire casting soft shadows across the log walls. A kettle whistled on the stove, and outside, snowflakes whispered down through the trees. She looked over at me and smiled. "You ever think this place would become a landmark?" I sipped my coffee, let the silence stretch, then said, "Out here in the woods, the most valuable thing ain't the land, it's the space to be exactly who you are. And to protect it, no matter the cost. If you believe some places are worth protecting, no matter what. Like this video and subscribe for more real justice stories." In the end, this story isn't just about a cabin, or even about winning a court case. It's about something far greater, the importance of standing your ground when your values, history, and rights are under threat. Sam Granger's fight reminds us that tradition still matters, and that land, especially land passed down through generations, is more than dirt and trees. It's memory. It's identity. And it deserves to be protected not just with fences, but with resolve, knowledge, and the law. The story also teaches us that power without accountability leads to overreach. HOAs, corporations, or even local authorities must operate within their rightful limits. When they forget that, people like Sam serve as a powerful reminder that justice is not just an idea, it's something worth fighting for. And perhaps most importantly, it shows that healing is possible. That communities can learn, grow, and reconnect, not through force, but through respect, humility, and shared purpose. Because sometimes, the strongest legacy we can leave is simply refusing to let the wrong people rewrite what's right.